It's a Holocaust memorial. And
it's at least 20,000 children, if I remember right. Like it's got to be at least.
This list, it's 18,500, but the list has grown since July 2025. Yeah. I mean, Israel is violating the ceasefire in Gaza day after day after day with no pushback from this administration. The Board of Peace has done nothing except work to set up a joint U.S.-Israeli military base in Kiryat Gat near the frontiers of Gaza to administer the concentration camp. They're even building a giant tower overlooking Gaza, like the towers that overlooked concentration camps and various other, internment centers throughout history. The MOU with Iran, I know it doesn't include any provisions about Gaza. It says nothing about Gaza, which is very unfortunate. Given how important Palestine is throughout the history of the Islamic Republic and to its base of support, which is partly why there are protests actually against the MOU in Iran, in Tehran, for the past several days. People chanting against Araghchi, the foreign minister, and Mohammed Ghalibaf. And it's one reason is they feel Palestine has been left out, and another reason is they don't trust the United States, and why should they? So Gaza and Lebanon remain theaters of conflict. Iran looks like a frozen conflict, and I think there could be like a momentary cessation. I don't know if the World Cup is a factor there. That Trump wants to let the World Cup play out. He doesn't really seem to care how the U.S. is perceived within the theater of the World Cup, given how many deportations, the deportation of the Somali referee, who is the African League's referee of the year, so many other players kind of being mistreated. But maybe it's a factor, and at this point it's just a 60-day freeze in hostilities. The Iran memorandum of understanding, between the U.S. and Iran was signed on Trump's 80th birthday, which also brought Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and Parliamentary Speaker Mohammed Ghalibaf under some criticism in Iran for basically giving Trump a political win on his birthday. But I think it was an opportune moment because Israel had struck the Dahia district that day or the day before, and it irritated and rankled Trump and his team sufficiently enough to see Netanyahu attempting to undermine a potential diplomatic achievement for Trump on the world stage, that this moment may not have returned. And there was enough momentum there to get this deal that they wanted. And let's not forget that Iran is under significant economic pressure, not just because of the U.S. naval siege, but because of the destruction of its productive base during Operation Epstein Fury. So Trump was celebrating this at his 80th birthday on the White House lawn for Freedom 250, which was the closest thing I've seen to the realization of the scenes from the movie Idiocracy in my lifetime. And it all culminated with the UFC mixed martial arts fight in the octagon on the White House lawn. And I think that this spectacle provides like the perfect microcosm for what MAGA actually is at this point, which is that there's no movement left. The entire thing is astroturfed and desperate and forced and catering to billionaires at the expense of the American public. And of course, there is an element of crass Zionism embedded in the entire scenario, along with the cheapening of all of the symbols of the what was once thought of as an American republic and is now sort of like a late Roman Empire carcass. It starts with 4,000 of the inners, 4,000 tickets being given out to basically Trump cronies, including David Ellison, who owns Paramount, which was broadcasting the whole spectacle. Mark Zuckerberg, who's been supporting Trump to get out of an SEC investigation. Melania, Mike Johnson, all of these figures by the ringside. Very few actual fight fans, and then soldiers brought in as props, given free tickets to make the spectacle seem patriotic at a time when Trump has lost the support of mostly young white men. And there was one incident. There are several incidents that they say just so much about where MAGA is, and also provide us with some insight into what's been happening throughout the Iran war. One was Danny Cormier, who was, once a UFC champion and is now always ringside as the color commentator with Joe Rogan. He's, under contract to appear at all these events, exposing Eric Trump for apparent insider trading. I don't know if you saw this. And
okay. And let me make one point, just to be fair to the narrative that you're putting forth, which is that if you are hacked, to then get control of your account back very quickly, that is a little fishy. That doesn't happen so often. So maybe, again, I want to be fair here, but that means, so that is a data point in your favor there, but still, I don't know. It's hard to believe Eric Trump would be that dumb.
Okay, well, let's just leave that aside. We'll, with an abundance of caution, you are the anti-conspiracy theory balance that we need for the gray zone. We got to stick to conspiracy facts. It seems like something that would completely be within the wheelhouse of the Trump mafia and helps provide insight into their Iran insider trading. I don't know how Barron Trump got to be worth $220 million. His father says he's a genius because he can turn his laptop on and off, doesn't demonstrate any other skills. Eric Trump is, involved with, he helped take public Powerus Drones, which is a company that's been testing Powerus is a defense tech company that's been testing anti-drone technology in Iran. I mean, they're heavily invested in all these conflicts. And Dana White, who's the CEO of UFC, donated $1 million to Donald Trump. Dana White would be someone who would, if this happened, tell Danny Cormier to delete that post and shut up and pretend the whole thing didn't happen. And then behind him is Ari Emanuel. You can't really go against this program. And that's what, there's no room for an independent voice in this program outside of Trump world. And that's what Sean Strickland found out when he issued some crude attacks on the U.S.-Israeli relationship. Sean Strickland is the reigning UFC champion who has beaten fighters that many thought were invincible. And Sean Strickland, of course, this was a staged PR stunt, but it was to make a point, which is that he would be arrested. The reigning champion would be arrested for showing up.
Which hosts former AIPAC lobbyist Wolf Blitzer, open Israel First advocates Jake Tapper, Dana Bash as anchors, which reported on the air that Hamas beheaded babies on October 7th, and their only source was the Israeli government telling them that. It's hard to imagine CNN becoming even more Zionist, but yet that's what we're about to see with the Ellisons taking it over. And, are they going to let Barry Weiss run CNN too? There were some reports last week saying yes. Then there was some pushback to that because Barry Weiss has just become so embarrassing for them that maybe they won't be so shameless as to do that. But regardless, whether it's Barry Weiss or not, it will get even more Zionist. And CNN, for all their Israel First activism from their anchors, they have had some reporters doing some good stuff, like when it comes to Gaza. I've seen it. Like
or CNN International will.
yeah, exactly. They've done. There has been some decent stuff, and I think if the Ellisons are now in control, can we really expect any of that to be allowed on air? I strongly doubt it.
Yeah. Dana Bash, Jake Tapper, those figures will be elevated at CNN. That's what will happen.
They already tried that. They tried to give Jake Tapper a primetime show. It was a disaster. He was like gone within a couple of weeks. So good luck with that, elevating your roster of Israel firsters to even bigger heights. Is just, unfortunately, there's still a thing called ratings and an audience, and being an open advocate for Israel on a cable news network that's supposed to be fair and balanced, it just doesn't land.
Well, it really just shows how ideological the entire project of corporate media always was. They're lifting the mask. That's sort of the thesis of Michael Parenti's Inventing Reality. And, Henry Luce, who kind of created American corporate media, was so ideological that he supported fascism. He was an admirer of Mussolini, but he would try to conceal the ideology behind control over by upholding reality and advancing the American century. And now we see it's not about ratings. They don't even necessarily care about ratings. There may not even be necessarily a profit motive in bringing Barry Weiss in. CBS is tanking. CBS is losing ratings. It's in the basement. Who's that guy? Tony Dukoupel, the guy who got circumcised at 40 so he could marry his Israeli wife. That's the anchor. He's like the least popular anchor. He's, anathema to American viewers. He's also extremely untalented. She brought in this guy, Nick Bilton, to run 60 Minutes, Barry Weiss did. He's unheard of, has no news experience. He was basically like a product and marketing manager. I actually know someone who knew him in media and said he was just like this middling kind of product manager who would organize like sort of corporate partnerships for media outlets. He comes in there and then he fires Scott Pelley, who was the biggest CIA tool at 60 Minutes. He's done like 5 pieces on promoting Havana Syndrome in the past 2 years and only 1 on Gaza. And what are they going to replace him with? Like Olivia Reingold or someone from the Free Press? It's not like I'm going to miss Scott Pelley with his fake little square jawed, I care about my country performance. I love Zelensky. I anointed the sores on Zelensky's feet. Mr. Trump, what did you do? But, I'm not going to miss him. And in some ways it's good. Like, let's show the American public how ideological and militantly Zionist the corporate media is. Let's really just show them that it's an enemy of the people and bring in these talentless, rabid fanatics and show them and show them the door. They will turn to independent media or alternative sources. So I'm here for Barry Weiss taking over.
I had to stay quiet during the whole Scott Pelley thing because it was like, because all the outrage was directed at Barry Weiss and the Ellisons, and and for good reason. But yet to elevate Scott Pelley as like an example of journalistic integrity, when, as you said, he's every time there's a State Department or CIA propaganda campaign, he's been there to promote it. Everything, like all the things we cover, he's been pushing the propaganda that we debunk every single time. So, but it's just a reflection of what a bad manager and how ideological Barry Weiss is. That even she alienated Scott Pelley, who stood up and did lose his job, and I think deliberately. And I do respect him for doing that. But it was just so I had to stay quiet as everybody was praising him, knowing his actual journalistic record is just, it's nothing to applaud.
Yeah, everything he did was, CIA approved. He had 3 interviews with Zelensky that played out in 4 parts. And the whole point of these interviews was just to convince Americans to support sending more billions of dollars to Ukraine, to shovel more men into the meat grinder, to continue this war that continues now. I found like part of this interview that he did with what's that lady's name? Lulu Navarro. And there's such a revealing, I think I got the right part bookmarked here, but there's such a revealing exchange about how the establishment sees journalism and what we're losing with Barry Weiss. I can accept being called stupid and a clown. All of the above may be true. But one thing I cannot countenance is being told I don't love my country. While I may not have worn the uniform, I sat there in trenches in Iraq and Afghanistan with our soldiers. And I did that because I love my country. And I don't know if the president has done anything like that. You get into journalism because you love your country and because you believe in freedom of speech. That's why I did it. And it's like so performative, but that just says it all to me about how they think, like how that class of people that's being pushed out the door at 60 Minutes thinks, which is that they actually think they're serving their country like they're practically in uniform by embedding with the military and presenting the Pentagon's narrative of these evil imperialist invasions in Afghanistan and Iraq, because they're risking their lives maybe by being in a tank. And that you go into journalism because you love your country. Like, no, that's actually not why you're supposed to go into journalism. And that's why everybody hates you and nobody trusts you. You go into journalism because you want to expose your country's corrupt elite. In some ways, you're at war with the forces in control of your country.
Or even more modest, if you love facts, if you want to give people the truth, if you believe in fact gathering. I mean, that's the most basic thing. You just like the truth, and that's not his first priority. It's to a nationalist ideal, not to a factual one.
And so now we're entering a new era, against the backdrop of the UFC idiocracy on the White House lawn, where those who are elevated to these places in the pantheon of journalistic institutions like 60 Minutes or CBS, CNN will be promoting a mafia, a very sectarian, partisan mafia. I guess Scott Pelley represents the old mafia of like John McCain as the Republican and Obama as the Democrat, the post-World War II order. And this is like the late Roman Trump Zionist mafia that hates Islam, which is why this guy from Sky News, whose name I'm now forgetting, was just promoted by Barry Weiss, just because he was a black British anchor who denounced Muslims every day. That's pretty much all he had to do to get that job. And so they're just promoting and shamelessly, nakedly promoting a deeply unpopular ideological and political point of view at these institutions that used to pose as objective. And I'm glad that the mask is off and that anyone with any critical faculties will now see that this is not objective, and these aren't just the facts, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm not an accelerationist when it comes to politics, but I think in media, I think what you're saying does make sense, that Barry Weiss does fully lift the mask off, and everyone now can see what ideological system we're living under when it comes to our media. And so, as bad as I feel for all the employees who have to work under her reign, I mean, imagine like being a professional journalist trying to take your job seriously, and all of a sudden your new boss is like a Zionist activist with no real journalism experience, who was an op-ed columnist who spent her life trying to get Palestinian Voices canceled. I mean, I feel bad for them. But if we're going to live under this corporate controlled ideological system, then I guess the most brazen, extreme, incompetent elements, I guess there's some utility in having them at the helm, because it shows us what we're really living under.
Yeah, I mean, it's agonizing, and it will be agonizing to watch what they do.
It's brutal. It's brutal.
But it's not going to fall on fertile soil. And you just look at the Zionist influencers on X or Instagram. Like, are any of them remotely appealing or convincing? They just produce anger and division and make everybody want to vomit. Maybe the last one who had any credibility was Jerry Seinfeld. And he's destroying his image. He could have just been like George Costanza or whatever, Jason Alexander. He was always out there like promoting a 2-state solution. But Jerry can't resist being like, "Go IDF! Palestine doesn't exist. What is the deal with Palestinian civilians? Why do they run to the bombs?" So it's just agonizing. It will be horrendous to watch, but more and more people will turn to independent media. And I think there's going to be a greater push to censor these platforms that disseminate our work, as we saw during the Biden era. And I made comments earlier about this yellow line that was imposed in Gaza to prevent people from returning to their homes, and the yellow line that's being imposed by Israel and Lebanon. Like, we know where the yellow line starts, but we don't know where it stops. And the yellow line is expanding into our own society. It's kind of like an invisible yellow line that delineates what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And it's encircling now corporate media in a way that's undeniable. Whereas obviously corporate media was always pro-Israel, but now it's just being clearly delineated by Israel first billionaires like David Ellison and their minions. And we're just here to cross the yellow line. That's why independent media should exist. I mean, when someone says they're independent, they have to stand against that program. Independent doesn't just mean, you're not sponsored by a state or a corporation. It means you stand against, you presenting an alternative to that program. And by the way, going back to, going forward, there should be, if we had a real government after Trump, they would investigate all of this insider trading and prosecute them. It's like, we're not going to get that, Obama. It's going to be like Obama not prosecuting one single banker after the financial crash.
I mean, they were willing to investigate Trump for all these fake things like
exactly
Russian ties, which was a complete hoax. They did, and then they were willing to go after January 6th because January 6th was an assault on the Capitol. But yeah, insider trading, it's such a clear case for them to do. They should take that up. And politically, I think that would even be popular because people, want to see corruption held to account.
Except with Nancy Pelosi.
Right. That's true. Yeah, exactly.
There's so much insider trading in Congress. It's kind of like, but it doesn't compare to what the Trumps are doing. So I got like a hard stop in 15 minutes. Do you want to cover the integration of the militaries or?
Totally up to you. I mean, that's a huge topic that I think our audience would love to hear about. How, if you thought we were super tied to Israel at the hip, well, what do you hear what people in Congress are trying to do to make us even more, even more immersed?
And this is Tom Cotton's initiative. Tom Cotton being, our AIPAC, but he's also from Arkansas, a state that isn't one of the biggest job producers, has a large, not very wealthy rural population. And he wants to basically bring Israel into the American defense production base, which would create jobs in Arkansas and make Israel and the U.S., the relationship, even more inextricable than it currently is, because it would mean denying jobs to people who need them in Arkansas. It's even more dangerous, possibly, than the $300 billion of aid or so that's been sent to Israel since 1948. Responsible Statecraft has some of the best coverage of this initiative, which is the whole point. That's the point.
It's basically taking U.S. workers and their livelihoods hostage, saying that if you want to have a district that survives economically, you have to be Israel first.
Yep.
And it's a recognition that they've lost full public support. So the only way to keep U.S. assistance to Israel going, to keep Israel's death machine running, is to tie it to the livelihoods of American workers. I guess this was inevitable. And it also means that Whereas now there's some performative votes every year to make, where Israel can only get assistance if it's, meeting U.S. obligations and U.S. human rights laws. Now forget it. That won't even be necessary anymore, because Israel will basically be an official appendage of the U.S. government.
I mean, there's been this debate over the years, who controls who. And I think since October 7th, it's increasingly clear that it's Israel and its various cutouts and proxies in the U.S. that is in so many ways occupying U.S. government and U.S. institutions. But I'm increasingly of the mind that you can't separate the two, that they've been integrated. The power elite that controls the United States has been sort of integrated into this system of Zionist hegemony. And now this will be formalized through the NDAA in 2027 through Section 224 and another section which hasn't been given the same level of scrutiny, which is Section 662. Again, this is responsible the military's sensitive data by bringing so many soldiers there to defend the apartheid colony.
Max, the biggest takeaway for me from that story is it underscores to me how terrible you are at self-promotion, because you haven't mentioned yet that story confirms something you put up on the Gray Zone a long time ago, right? Which was that Israel was caught putting surveillance devices on like a Secret Service vehicle. Didn't you have that a long time ago?
I buried that in one of my Charlie Kirk reports because there were just so many. There was just so much there at that time that I was getting from White House sources. And I had to get it all out there, but I highlighted it in my interview with Tim Dillon in September 2025, which was right after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And I mentioned that a White House source told me that it was, I think, during one of Netanyahu's many visits to Washington, that Shin Bet agents placed a tracking device on a Secret Service emergency vehicle, which happened to be the vehicle that would have responded to an emergency involving the president, including a potential assassination attempt, an attempt on his life. Why would they do that? Well, also, I think maybe people dismissed me for saying that or called me a conspiracy theorist or something. The New York Times explicitly confirmed that in the report. Which is shocking. I mean, why are they trying to track the vehicle that would respond to an assassination attempt? Why are they interested in, attempts on the president's life or the emergencies around the White House?
The Times did confirm exactly what you reported a while ago, of course, without acknowledging your reporting. But you're not doing yourself any favors by even forgetting true. But that just speaks to how you're focused on the actual work of journalism itself and not promoting it. But congrats on that, because I remember when you came out with that, I would see people dismissing it, but now it's even confirmed by the New York Times, although many months later. I wonder. I was always wondering who else knew about that, but it looks like Trump knew at the time, which would color Trump's thinking on his relations with Israel. And one thing the source told me is that Trump is actually concerned about threats to his physical security, which could even come from elements, in the Israel first world, or that's something he thinks about. But of course, Mike Waltz, who we played a clip of him earlier, the UN ambassador, when he was in the House on the committee to investigate the Butler shooting, where supposedly a shooter nicked Trump's ear with a bullet and nearly ended his life and campaign. Mike Waltz was attempting to push Trump into believing that the IRGC, Iranian intelligence, was behind Butler. So those are the forces that have really been working on Trump psychologically. And at the same time, we have a report going back to, I think, 2018 from Politico. 3 former senior U.S. officials say Israel has planted Stingray
surveillance devices throughout the White House to spy on the president and his advisors. That was in the first Trump term. How'd they get in the White House? Who can get into the White House?
And meanwhile, what was actually happening in terms of like the public conversation and Democrats is they were freaking out because there was this fake Russiagate thing about Russia planting surveillance devices and Vodafones or something like that. Remember that it was a big Russiagate thing. The Mueller team even investigated it. So just one more example of all this hysteria over fictional Russian surveillance and Russian interference was happening just as actual Israeli surveillance, Israeli influence was going on, and nobody cared because that infiltration, that influence is supported on a bipartisan basis.
Definitely. And I mean, I think the scandal is titanic. If you actually entertain my question to its logical conclusion, how did they get into the White House? You have to assume that it was an Israeli who had come into the White House to meet with Donald Trump or his team that planted those devices. How else can you get in? It's not like you're like throwing them over the fence. Like you won't even get away with that. So that could potentially be Netanyahu, who was caught by former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson planting a listening device in his personal toilet at his home. Boris Johnson wrote about that in his memoir. So it seems to be that he's directing the spying on Donald Trump, if not planting devices. And that's something that, if these reporters have access to all of these figures in the White House and the DIA, it's definitely harder for me to get sources these days. But if they have access, they should be asking these questions about Netanyahu's personal role. And, with that, I think we got to wrap. I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
No, that's all I got.
Well, call your, light up those switchboards, folks, against Section 224, against integrating our country's military with Israel's. Can you believe it? Also, thank you to Jaime Francis, who's been a generous supporter through super chats of this show over the weeks. And to all of you who've supported us, we continue to grow and expand our coverage. Wyatt Reed's still covering the situation in southern Lebanon and Beirut. And we'll be back soon. Like this stream, subscribe to us on YouTube, and sign up on Substack if you haven't done so yet to get everything we publish free in your inbox, or support us on Patreon. I put up some exclusive stuff there, and we will be back with you real soon. For now, we're out. Thanks a lot, Aaron, and peace, everybody.